I saw that godforsaken game in my dreams, many times.
Magic to Warwolf Leader. Bogies are confirmed hostile on a direct course to Miami. You are cleared to engage and destroy.
A nightmare that I'll never forget. Picture this, you're a video game developer in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Call of Duty has been taking the world by storm with a string of hits. First, COD 4 Modern Warfare, then World at War, then Modern Warfare 2 2009, then Black Ops. Millions of copies sold and millions of dollars in profits. It's clear that Call of Duty is doing something right. It's said that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and it didn't take long for different franchises to adopt that mindset. What does this have to do with Ace Combat? The core of Assault Horizon's gameplay was inspired by this big boom in the FPS market. Project Aces wanted to take what they were seeing with Call of Duty and somehow bring that into Ace Combat. Fast-paced action that was all up in your face with hardly any downtime, giving you hardly any chances to catch your breath.
To put in the new features into Assault Horizon, Ace Combat always wanted to be a flight shooter. And to get that more out of the title, they actually played a lot of FPS games, TPS games to get the new features out.
In an interview celebrating Ace Combat's 25th anniversary, Kazutoki Kono stated, "At the time, we were faced with a situation where we had to rethink what our next title should be in order to continue the series. At the time, there was talk within the company of changing Ace Combat to suit the FPS market, which was booming at the time." Looking at the final product, it's not hard to spot the various things that were included as a result of that Call of Duty inspiration. AC-130 segment? Check. Black Hawk Gunner segments? Check. Attack helicopter missions? Check. This Call of Duty inspiration is also what fueled the infamous close range assault mechanic, or as it's known in-game, Dogfight mode and Airstrike mode.
今の FPS や TPS とも違うハイスピードデストラクションの全く新しいタイプ。
The devs at Project Aces, along with the publisher Bandai Namco, were probably hoping that with this focus on close-ranged, up-in-your-face, on-rails combat, it would appeal to a wider audience and therefore result in more sales. We'll talk about this more in-depth in the gameplay part of the video, but it's important to bring up where it came from now. COD and the FPS boom were also inspirations for things such as there not being any mission briefings between missions, therefore making the gameplay, in their words, completely seamless.
And the structure of Assault Horizon is made so that prior titles had a briefing, then the mission going on, and then the debriefing and repeating itself. But this time we didn't want the concentration of the players to be cut off in the middle. And we wanted sort of like this addictive situation that the players don't want to stop playing the game. So we stopped doing the mission structure like prior titles, and it's completely seamless now. The cutscenes, the missions itself is completely seamless so that the concentration of the players can be kept.
Now, you may be watching these interview clips I've been sprinkling in and thinking to yourself, dang, Kazutoki Kono seemed really sure about the direction of this game at the time, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Kono may have put on a brave face in all of the interviews he was a part of, but deep down, he felt that something was wrong, that this wasn't the right approach to take. Taking a look at that 25th anniversary interview again, Kono states, "Looking back, I think what was bad was that even though I didn't really agree with it, I convinced myself that it had to be that way. We prioritized the convenience of the company over the feelings of our customers. In other words, we weren't truly seeing things from the customer's perspective. Before long, the means of changing itself became the goal." That last sentence right there is what stands out to me. Before long, the means of changing itself became the goal. In other words, change for the sake of it. This tells me that midway through development, Kono became disillusioned. At first, taking Call of Duty's fast-paced gameplay and translating that to Ace Combat seemed like a great idea, but as the project deviated more and more from the standards that the devs had set for Ace Combat, that was when Kono probably started to get a bad feeling. It went from just experimenting and trying new things to outright throwing the soul of Ace Combat out the window. But he couldn't just scrap the project after so much time and money had already been thrown at it. I mean, being the executive director of this game, he definitely could have made a case for why Project Aces shouldn't have continued with Assault Horizon, but Bandai Namco would have just told him that the game is going to happen whether he likes it or not. So he had to essentially trick himself into thinking this was the right move. That being said, no amount of self-trickery could shield Kono and everyone else from the reviews when the game was released. I remember very well when I saw the scores on the review aggregation site right after the game's release. I was smoking a cigarette at home when I saw the incredibly low scores and collapsed to my knees. I can empathize with Kono when he talks about starting on something, thinking it's a great idea at first, but then as you progress, you realize it's not good. But because you're so deep into the project, you've spent money on it, and you've got a deadline to meet, you have to press on. That was my exact experience when making Cheddar Scares, a game that I made as part of one of Whiskey Dingo's game jams a long while back. That being said, I still hate Assault Horizon, and I'm still gonna tear it to shreds. But again, I can empathize with Kono's position. Contrary to popular belief, the decision to have Assault Horizon be set in the real world was not made by the story writer Jim DeFelice. In fact, when Project Aces reached out to him, DeFelice first thought that he would be writing a story set in Strangereal, but it turns out that Project Aces wanted him to write one that was set in the real world. I was familiar with the series, having played it since, well, let's just say for a long time. So when I was first contacted, I thought I was going to be writing in the fictional universe of the earlier games. I quickly found out that wasn't the case. The developers, who though Japanese were getting a lot of input from the American side of the company, specifically wanted someone who could create a story in the real world. Like with Dogfight mode and Airstrike mode, we'll talk about the story in greater detail later on, but I figured it was important to mention the origins of the game being set in the real world here. Assault Horizon is also the first Ace Combat game to be released for the PlayStation 3, and it eventually made its way to PC later down the line too. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's pretty hard to get copies of the game nowadays since you either need physical copies for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 or a Steam key for PC since the game has been delisted on all digital stores. Assault Horizon marks the point in Ace Combat when console exclusivity wasn't really a thing for the franchise moving forward. Well, aside from Infinity, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaking of bridges to cross, I think it's time that we start crossing the gameplay one now. Just relax, Thunderous, you're fine, you'll be good, you will live through this. Surely it can't be that bad, right? Right? You already know the first thing I'm gonna talk about here. Close Range Assault, aka Dogfight mode and Airstrike mode. This is the foundation, the core of Assault Horizon's minute-to-minute gameplay. The vast majority of your time playing this game will be spent engaging in this mechanic whether you want to or not. Starting with Dogfight mode, this is where you get behind an enemy fighter and then chase them around in a sometimes scripted, sometimes not scripted sequence trying to shoot them down. Before we talk about the bad parts of this mechanic, I do have to give the game some credit here. Being able to see the enemy's plane gradually come apart as you pump it full of cannon rounds and missiles is really neat. The most you'd see in previous games is some fire and smoke effects and maybe some fragments that would spawn from the wreckage, but the model itself would still be in one piece before disappearing in an explosion. Meanwhile, in Assault Horizon, wings, cockpits, engines, all of it can fully break apart from the jet once it's destroyed. A common phrase that was in Assault Horizon's marketing was making metal bleed, and I'd say the game succeeds in that regard with flying colors.
I owe you one.
Fox 1. Savant, this is Warwolf 1. Hold your position until we clear the base area.
Affirmative, Warwolf 1. Check. Fox 2. Colonel, returning inside. Be on the field. Quick stop. Beautiful. Still on me.
And the different camera angles are really awesome to see. I'm a huge sucker for nice camera work when it comes to fighter jets in combat. To give an example, there's a reason why, despite its shortcomings, I really like the movie Stealth. So to see an equivalent of that in the form of being right next to the cannon or from the perspective of your special weapon scratches that itch for me. And in Dogfight mode's case, being able to pull off a counter maneuver on an enemy that has you in their sights is so good. Little glimpses of why Ace Combat is so beloved can be found here. It's just a damn shame that's where the positives of the close range assault mechanic ends, because it is all downhill from here. While you can lose your lock if you're not following the enemy's movements, there is a little guidance from the game, which can make a lot of the combat encounters feel on rails, and in a number of instances, they are on rails. Enemies that are marked as target leads will require that you initiate dogfight mode with them 9 times out of 10. Once in a blue moon, you can get a kill on a target lead enemy outside of DFM, but most of the time, they'll just use flares or pull a maneuver to dodge your attack that's crazy even by ace combat standards. The game will then make the target lead enemy invincible up until the end of a scripted moment.
Oh yeah! Come on, hey, Natural. We got nails. Oh, what the? It's off this sticky mine. Oh, damn.
It doesn't matter how many cannon rounds and missiles you pump that enemy full with. If the game wants you to see part of a building coming down, you're gonna see part of a building coming down.
I have you now. He's mine, Dutch.
I got your back, boss.
Not good.
If the game wants you to fly between some skyscrapers, you're gonna fly between some skyscrapers.
Apache, stick with me. Get these guys. We have them on the run. Stay on it. He's not over yet.
Dead.
Hostile located.
If the game wants you to fly over the Pentagon, past the Washington Monument, and over the Capitol building, you're gonna fly over the Pentagon, past the Washington Monument, and over the Capitol building.
What's going on, Mike? Can't fight over there.
All allies, defend your position. Keep it away from World War I. Breaking copy. We're heading south. All aircraft stand clear of the area over the Capital District. Magic to Nomad 6-3. We have a downed airman near the National Mall. Roger. Magic.
The game is trying to have these epic moments that make you go, whoa, that was cool! But because these moments are scripted, and because you can tell they're scripted very easily with the invincible enemies, it makes those moments the exact opposite of epic. Well, okay, let me be a bit more specific. Scripted moments in and of themselves aren't inherently bad. They're definitely harder to pull off in the sense of the player feeling satisfied or truly excited from it, but it can be done. But when Assault Horizon over here only makes a half-assed attempt at covering up just how scripted these engagements are, it gets to a point where it would be funny if it wasn't so sad. And the sheer number of scripted moments is insane, easily surpassing something like the number of scripted moments in a Call of Duty campaign. It can get especially ludicrous when you've pumped hundreds of cannon rounds and 5+ missiles up a guy's ass, but because you haven't yet seen the totally cool and epic shot that you absolutely had to see, otherwise you'd just cease to exist in real life, the enemy is still alive. Because 9 times out of 10, the target leads can only be taken down through this mechanic, it limits what you can do in the air. No more are you allowed to freely engage a target however you see fit. And in a select few cases, if you happen to initiate dogfight mode while the enemy is near a building or low to the ground,
The target's confirmed destroyed. Yeah, sir. I better keep right. Locked on. We still have several contacts.
Affirmative. Time for cleanup.
Werewolf 1, you're off the scope.
why the devs didn't think to include some kind of system that prevents you from initiating dogfight mode below a certain altitude is beyond me. Actually, why the devs thought of and implemented dogfight mode itself is beyond me. And airstrike mode isn't any better. Airstrike mode places you on a set path against a group of ground or naval targets. Good positioning, being careful with your speed so you don't slam into the ground or sea? Psh, who needs that? Just hit the shoulder buttons, perform a strafe run along a straight line, and you'll be good. This mechanic takes the skill that's needed when performing air-to-ground and air-to-sea attacks and tosses it out the window. And engaging with this mechanic can actually cause you to take more fire. It's kinda hard to dodge incoming missiles when you're more or less locked into flying in a straight path for a little bit. At least here, most of the time, you don't have to use airstrike mode if you really don't want to. Emergency airstrike mode paths are where you have to perform that strafe run and eliminate all targets in one go, but that only shows up a few times throughout the campaign. Meanwhile, there are countless target lead aircraft that can only be killed in dogfight mode. Oh, speaking of aircraft, you know how in every other Ace Combat game you had to earn each one through a basic fundamental aspect of game design known as a progression system? Assault Horizon doesn't have that. And before anyone says anything, I know this isn't the first time that freedom of choice for the player has been restricted, but hold on to that thought for a second. There is a progression system for ranks and skills, aka this game's take on perks from COD, in free mission and the multiplayer, but for the aircraft, there's none of that. No credits to unlock aircraft and special weapons. What Assault Horizon does is just so dumb. It gives you a small predetermined list of available aircraft to choose from rather than letting you choose for yourself. This problem is kind of fixed when you hop into free missions since you have a lot more options, but even then, you still aren't able to take any aircraft you want into any mission. The game has a number of classifications for the aircraft, but the main three are fighter, multi-role, and attacker. Fighters can only do dogfight mode, multi-roles can do both dogfight mode and airstrike mode, and attackers can only do airstrike mode. Because attackers can only do airstrike mode, meaning they can't perform dogfight mode to take down those target leads, they are only flyable for a single mission in the entire campaign. Even in free mission, if the mission isn't hostile fleet, you can't pick any attackers. That freedom to pick whatever plane and special weapon combo you wanted was part of what made Ace Combat so fun in the past. Who cares if it's nonsensical to take something like an A-10 with rocket pods into an air-to-air battle? If that's how someone wants to tackle a mission, who are we to stop them? Or rather, who is the game to stop them? Apparently Assault Horizon is, because that freedom is gone here. Even if you could pick whatever aircraft you wanted for a mission, you'd be flying blind for your first time playthrough, because aside from a cutscene here and there are no mission briefings! Hello? Mission briefings are kind of, maybe, sort of, really important. They tell you what's gonna be happening for a particular mission. Okay, going back to Assault Horizon limiting your aircraft choices. You know how I told you to hold on to that thought about Ace Combat restricting player choice for aircraft in the past? In the Japanese version of Ace Combat 3, you could only pick between a few aircraft at a time. This small selection would be updated depending on how far into the campaign you were, along with which faction you were a part of. The reason why this isn't an issue here, at least for me, is because for one, there was no set-in-stone formula for what an Ace Combat game was quite yet. The PlayStation 1 trilogy is when the series was first born and still trying to figure out what it wanted to exactly be. And for two, if that's even a phrase, the limited aircraft selection actually works in tandem with the game's faction swapping mechanic. You can only fly the Su-43 Berkut 2 if you're with Upio. You can only fly the F-22C Raptor 2 if you're with General Resource. You can only fly the Delphinus family if you're with Newcom. So choosing from a limited number of aircraft based on which faction you're a part of makes you feel more connected with whoever you're flying for. In Assault Horizon, Ace Combat's core formula has long been set in stone by this point. There's no faction swapping mechanic, and there's just no good reason for this limitation to even be a thing by this point. Whenever a series prides itself on freedom of choice for the player, it has to be very careful whenever it's restricted. Assault Horizon wasn't just not careful, it was full-blown reckless. Jets aren't the only thing that you fly in Assault Horizon though. As stated in the development section, you get to fly attack helicopters and be the gunner for a Black Hawk and AC-130. This reeks of copying Call of Duty. These missions all got the, hey, can I copy your homework? Sure, but don't make it obvious treatment. Death from Above from COD 4 for the AC-130 mission, levels like Shock and Awe from COD 4 along with Of Their Own Accord and Modern Warfare 2 2009 for the Door Gunner missions, and Payback from Black Ops for the attack helicopter missions. A classic case of a series throwing away what makes it unique in the pursuit of chasing trends instead of making them. This is one of the most infuriating things to see in gaming for me. It's one thing for devs to take inspiration from something else while putting their own spin on it to keep the identity of their series intact. But for the devs to compromise what makes their franchise so special in the pursuit of that inspiration means that nobody wins. Call of Duty fans aren't winning because aside from the occasional vehicle mission, they're accustomed to being infantry. And Ace Combat fans aren't winning because the skies aren't so free to fly around in, between things like the limited aircraft selection, dogfight mode being required for numerous enemies, and blatant copying. These Call of Duty inspired missions are fine fine on their own, they're not anything to write home about, but because of what they stand for, the intentional obliteration of what made Ace Combat so great and beloved in the past, I can't help but to have a sour taste when playing these levels. I will say though, the bomber mission is pretty darn cool. This is the one deviation from the norm that doesn't feel like it was copied over from Call of Duty. Flying through that early warning network and then carpet bombing the enemy in a sea of explosions is awesome.
Let's roast some marshmallows. Good hit on building. Destroy target.
Something else that's awesome is the visual customization. While you're only able to change the colors of predetermined designs, it's still cool to make essentially your own skin for the aircraft in question. Admittedly though, it can be pretty hit or miss as to whether your aircraft will look good. Sometimes you can create something great with the designs you're given. Other times though, I tried.
That shit is fucking trash, dog.
It's a shame that this form of personal customization hasn't returned since, because it has potential. I would love for this to return, but with more available options. You know the customization system in Armored Core 6? I want that level of customization to be offered in Ace Combat 8. You know what's also awesome? The music. One of the few amazing things about this game is the soundtrack that plays during missions. It perfectly matches the kind of energy that Assault Horizon brings to the table. Even if I'm not a fan of the methods that Assault Horizon uses to bring that up-in-your-face non-stop action, the music still matches perfectly with it. Some of my favorites include Dogfight, White Devil, Naval Warfare, Shall Defend, and Release. On the note of audio-related things, where's the enemy dialogue? Being able to hear the enemy comms chatter is a big part of these games. Whether it's them exclaiming about how we need to be shot down, or them doing some trash talking after getting a one-up on us, the audio is a major ingredient that can't be forgotten. But outside of a few voice lines from main antagonists here and there, it was. You know what else was forgotten? Good writing for a story, because Assault Horizon's story is cliched to hell and back with some big plot holes, and the characters are at best okay and at worst entirely forgettable. Is it time? Let's get this over with. Before we dive into the mess that is Assault Horizon story, I actually want to take a look at a book first, The Last Ace, which was released exclusively on Amazon a little under a month before Assault Horizon. The Last Ace, written by Jim DeFelice, serves as a prequel to the events of the game. Lieutenant Colonel William Brass Bishop is test flying an advanced F-22 Raptor codenamed Righteous. Or rather, he's overseeing Righteous more than test flying it, given that this Raptor is an AI-controlled machine. Think of it as a prototype of the drones in Ace Combat 7. Bishop is just there to take control in the event that something goes wrong. During this test flight that goes on to become a combat exercise, his mind drifts off to some of his first ever combat experiences during the Bosnian War, with the story switching between that and the combat exercise throughout. During the Bosnian War parts of the story, Bishop is flying with a hard-ass squadron leader, Lieutenant Colonel James Skull Scranton, an amazing pilot hungry for his 5th kill so he can be called an ace. Now, unfortunately, The Last Ace isn't available on Amazon anymore. The most you'll find online nowadays are articles summarizing the events of the book. But if you're willing to send an email to Jim DeFelice kindly asking for a copy, I'm sure he'd be happy to provide it to you. That's what I did. Not only was Jim more than happy to provide a copy of The Last Ace, he also elaborated on why it got taken down in the first place. It's currently believed that The Last Ace got taken down due to Jim getting harassed online as a result of Assault Horizon being torn to shreds. But according to the reply I got when asking for a copy, actually, the short story was part of a package we were using to sell a book series connected to the game. The series never materialized for various reasons. Namco was concerned about rights issues related to external agreements, including trademark agreements with the use of various aircraft in the game and series itself, and asked that the story be taken down. The issues had nothing to do with the story itself. As for being harassed, I don't think I was. There were definitely legit criticisms of the game, not a few of which some of the developers, including myself, agreed with. But that's true of every game. I certainly have nothing against the fanbase or Namco. After reading this reply, it makes complete sense for this to be the case. The Last Ace didn't get taken down until 2016, 5 or so years after Assault Horizon's release. If The Last Ace was taken down due to harassment, it would have been pulled from stores way sooner than that. It's also really nice to hear that DeFelice doesn't have any ill will against the Ace Combat fanbase. Having now read The Last Ace, I thought it was really good. The story even has a moment where Skull's F-16 takes some damage, but the canopy won't blow, so Bishop has to shoot off the canopy so Skull can bail out. A reference to Bishop doing that very same thing with Guts during Homefront. I thought that was neat. So, would I recommend that you read The Last Ace? Absolutely. It's a damn shame that Assault Horizon's story isn't of this caliber though. This puts me in a really weird spot. On the one hand, Jim did a great job with The Last Ace, but on the other hand, the story in Assault Horizon is awful, and I need to tear it to shreds while trying to not pop a blood vessel. So it's like, good job Jim, but you also f***ed up. TLDR, me tearing apart Assault Horizon's story is not an attack against Jim DeFelice himself. Russian rebels pull off a coup d'etat and overthrow the legitimate government of the country. We're then called in to help restore peace and order by defeating the rebels and re-establishing said legitimate government. Or the Russian Civil War is part of the plot, but we're not directly involved in helping the legitimate government come back into power. Sounds like a familiar plot, right? That's because this kind of story was everywhere in the late 2000s and early 2010s. 2007, COD 4 Modern Warfare. 2010, Tom Clancy's Hawks 2. 2012, Ghost Recon Future Soldier. Everyone and their mother seemed to want to write about a Russian civil war in a military setting during the 7th gen console era. Jim DeFelice says that when it came to writing Assault Horizon's story, he knew early on that the game would need to feature Russia to some extent. After all, not only was he locked into a real world setting, but most of the aircraft in Ace Combat games come from the United States and Russia. We all knew we wanted to have as many cutting edge aircraft in the mix as possible. That meant not only that Americans would have to play a key role in the story, but so somehow would Russians, because between those two countries, you have most of the world's frontline jets. But Jim, respectfully, you could have done literally anything else with Russia. It's like gas station pizza. Perfectly fine on its own, but if you have slice after slice after slice, you're eventually gonna get sick of it. Experiencing Russian coup d'etat plot after Russian coup d'etat plot after Russian coup d'etat plot means that I'm not exactly gonna be in the mood for another one. And yet, Assault Horizon crams another one down my throat because fuck me, I guess. I mean, I'm used to things going down my throat, but come on now. Guys, I was talking about food going down my throat. What did you think I was talking about? Get your heads out of the clouds. Look, here's the thing. Any bad or otherwise rough story can be easier to push yourself through if you have a great cast of characters. Modern Warfare 2 2022's campaign is a great example of this. The actual story itself is kinda weak with some stupid nonsensical plot points.
Grass.
General, Killing Hassan is an act of war. Keeping him is illegal. Right now, he is too hot to hold.
But the characters are incredible. The bromance between Ghost and Soap in particular is beautiful.
That's all rubbish.
You said you wanted to win. Congratulations, you're a winner.
Hawaiian Beal, your head.
English, McTavish.
Sorry, sir. Let me translate. Go fuck yourself.
Much better.
Unfortunately, the characters in Assault Horizon are at best mid and at worst entirely forgettable. Werewolf 1, Colonel Bishop, he could be described as your typical default video game protagonist in a modern day military setting. Seriously, that's it. Does he have any standout moments? No. Does he have any memorable lines? No, unless you want to count the numerous times he just says werewolf to everyone. Does he have any character development to speak of? No. I mean, unless you want to count him having a nightmare about an enemy ace pilot that by some miracle turns out to be real, even though that just doesn't happen in the real world, and then he shoots the guy down, therefore ending his nightmare that he seemed to manifest on his own somehow? Trust me, we're gonna come back to that. I'm not through with that plot point yet. Guts, Werewolf 2? He just loves vodka. That's it. Yeah, he has some chit chatter during combat that once in a blue moon can get a chuckle out of you. Nothing more than a chuckle though. He does have a standout line though that perfectly captures most people's thoughts about Assault Horizon.
This ain't ace combat, bro.
Werewolf 3 and 4 don't even get names. Two pilots who got their bachelor's degrees, went through the training needed to become commissioned officers in the United States Air Force, be it through Officer Training School, Reserve Officer Training Corps, or the Air Force Academy, went through the years of flight training needed to become fully certified combat pilots before finally getting assigned to Werewolf Squadron where they see combat. Those pilots don't get names. Hell, they don't even have entries on the Ace Combat Wiki. There's so little info about them. Some of you might be thinking, is there any chance Werewolf 3 and 4 could be the same pilots from The Last Ace if that's a prequel to this game? I can confidently say no, because in The Last Ace, Bishop is Werewolf 4, and Werewolf 2 is someone else, Major Kevin Shiny Chandler. More like Major Shatler. Fucking got him. With the Apaches, yeah, we don't ever get names for the others in Shooter Squadron, but it's not as big of an issue since there are only 2 attack helicopter missions. But because the majority of the campaign is spent with Werewolf Squadron, Werewolf 3 and 4 being nameless and faceless is very noticeable. The characters outside of Werewolf Squadron aren't any better. The only thing I remember about Major Illich is him entertaining Guts' addiction to vodka.
A few more drinks, eh?
Yeah, you can pay me off anytime.
No. There is not enough vodka in all Russia for you, Captain Gutierrez.
Oh, and him turning out to be a double agent with him being friends with Markov. And saying that this war is supposed to benefit Bishop somehow?
You are on our side, Major.
Maybe he meant that Bishop got to see combat by partaking in a sizable conflict one last time before needing to retire, because bro is getting old. As a matter of fact, Bishop looks like a dried up piece of asparagus. Bro has the haircut one in a character creator style of hair. Bro could sell ad space on that forehead he's got. Get the fuck out of here, Bishop. I gotta talk about Major Janice Real next because she's the definition of plain bread. No butter, no jam, no peanut butter, no Nutella, nothing. Just like how a random piece of bread on its own is plain and bland, Rail is just like that. She has some back and forth with Guts that can be kind of fun to see in here, but that's it. D-Ray, the Apache pilot, he's alright, not very memorable though. Jackie, the other guy in the Apache, just goes, "Whoa," when you roll to dodge a missile. Are there any characters in this game that have even a resemblance of memorable moments, memorable dialogue, memorable or notable anything? Markov. For as stupid as the contrived rivalry between him and Bishop is, which we'll talk about in a minute, his reasons for having such a deep hatred against the United States is understandable. During the Bosnian War, Markov secretly fell in love with and married Krista Yoslav. In 1995, during Operation Deliberate Force, Krista got killed by an American bombing run. As a result, Markov swore to get revenge against the United States. If I found myself in a situation where I had a lover, and my lover got killed by someone, I would want to get revenge. I would be totally cool serving a life sentence if if it meant that I could avenge my lover. If it meant my lover could finally be at peace with their killer dead, I could live the rest of my life happy. And with that, I've no doubt been added to some sort of list if I'm not on one already. But I can understand why Markov wants to avenge his lover. He may not be able to kill the pilots that performed the bombing run, but he can get the next best thing with the weapon of mass destruction known as Trinity. But it's his rivalry with Bishop that I just don't get. His anger towards the US as a whole is understandable, and it makes sense that he would know Bishop's name and Warwolf's radio frequency, with Illich being a double agent. Illich would be like, hey, be careful of this guy in particular. But why would Markov care? Unless Bishop was one of the escort pilots for the B-2s during their bombing run, then Markov's hatred towards him would make a little more sense. We're never explicitly told that though, not in the game, nor in The Last Ace. So we have to assume Bishop wasn't among the escorts there. So Markov is literally mauling at Bishop for no reason. And can we talk about how Bishop willed Markov into existence through the nightmare he had at the beginning of the game? Bishop saying, "The shark, you're real," implies that he had no clue of this guy actually existing beforehand. So Bishop dreamt up an enemy ace pilot with no prior knowledge of this guy actually existing, and then the enemy ace turns out to be real. No prior clashes in the sky, no pictures, nothing to tell Bishop that this guy exists. And yet Bishop's brain somehow knew all along? That just doesn't ever happen. Imagine how stupid it would be if Mobius 1 had a nightmare about Yellow 13's SU-37 without even knowing about the guy to begin with, and then upon running into him and the rest of Yellow Squadron at the end of Lifeline, he went, "Yellow 13, you're real." Do you hear how stupid that sounds? Talisman has a nightmare about Pasternak. He meets him at the end of Liberation of Grace Maria. Strigan 1, you're real. Trigger has a nightmare about Mihai. He meets him at the end of First Contact. Soul 1, you're real. Again, I ask, do you hear how stupid that sounds? It would be one thing if the nightmare was about coming across a nondescript enemy ace pilot, and then when Bishop encounters Markov, he goes, "This reminds me of that nightmare I had." But for Bishop to have a crystal clear image of the specific plane that Markov is flying, along with the shark nose art, and then to see that exact same plane with the exact same nose art, that just doesn't ever happen! Oh, but we're not done yet. You know how in Ace Combat you often become the backbone of your country's or client's military? An ace pilot who can single-handedly turn the tide of a war, inspiring both fear and admiration, as Brett Thompson so eloquently put it in Ace Combat 0? Yeah, that's not here. Or rather, it's not here for 99% of the game. There's a single line said by Magic at the very end of the game during the Markov boss fight for that 1%. Oh wow, Assault Horizon, you're only, I don't know, 16 missions late to get the fucking memo there. And it's somehow even more insulting for the game to throw that line in there instead of them not addressing it entirely. And just for good measure, just for the goodest of measures, if goodest is even a fucking word, you gotta have that epic slow-mo last-minute save because this game didn't copy Call of Duty enough already. But you know what? I'm going insane here. Help me. Before we get to that part, we gotta hit a 180 and go back to the gameplay section for a little bit because I need to talk about how abysmal the Markov boss fight is. This boss fight is not only the worst one there is in all of Ace Combat, but it's also one of the worst boss fights in gaming history. Hell, it's not even really a boss fight because Markov is invincible for 99% of it. It would be a proper fight if Markov could actually take some damage and have his health be reduced. But since he physically can't take any damage until he lines up the shot to drop Trinity on the White House, it's essentially a glorified interactive cutscene. What makes this all even more dumb is that you need to be using Dogfight mode against Markov for this entire fight, as if you're out of Dogfight mode for more than a minute, Markov drops Trinity on the White House. So it's pointless to use Dogfight mode since Markov doesn't take any damage up until the very end, but at the same time, it's mandatory since you get a game over if you're out of Dogfight mode for more than a minute. It's like if you were to get assigned homework where you don't get any points for completing it, but you lose points if you don't do the work and turn it in. A fruitless endeavor that has no purpose other than for it to be busy work. That's what this quote-unquote fight is. Busy work. Busy work that turns into a totally intense and sudden last-minute scripted moment because this game just couldn't help itself.
Markov. He's down. Trinity.
Colonel, Trinity is still alive.
I have it.
Oh god, oh god, oh this is so intense. I almost got it, I almost got it. One more on-rail sequence to finish this game off because it's f***ing cinema! I need a minute, hang on. It's worth reiterating, I'm not making an attack against Jim DeFelice himself, or at least I hope that's not what this came off as. I did name drop him a couple times throughout that part, but I'm criticizing his work, not him as a person. Anyway, are we done? Are we done with this piece of shit? No? What do you mean we're not done? Aw, fuck! Before we begin, I have to give a shout out to Fuzon once more. The fact he was willing to suffer through some Assault Horizon to help with my video should go to show how much of a gigachad he is. Thank you once again for helping out, man. Just like with Joint Assault, Assault Horizon's multiplayer can be split into two parts, co-op and PvP. Beginning with co-op first, here you're able to get together with up to 3 other players to take on 8 possible missions. Said missions being Inferno, Red Moon, Power Play, Pipeline, the second half of Launch, Motherland, Aftermath, and Homefront. All of the missions have the same objectives as their single-player versions, but come with an increase to the overall enemy count to accommodate for there being more than one player. However, at the very end of Homefront in co-op, there's a unique boss fight exclusive to this mode in the form of Markov showing up with his own squadron. Named enemy aces also make an appearance, but they don't seem to have an effect on anything. They don't give extra camos, and they don't seem to give extra points, though I didn't ever take a look at the breakdowns of the points for each mission, so I could be wrong there. There isn't even anything like the assault records to take a look at the aces after you've shot them down. These aces are just here for you to shoot them down if you want to, it seems. Credit where it's due, having a fellow player join me for these 8 missions did result in an overall better experience compared to playing them on my own. For as much as I despise the close range assault mechanic, I have to admit it is pretty cool to have multiple people teaming up in a combined dogfight mode or airstrike mode attack. However, there is one major thing holding this game's co-op back. The game only lets you pick from the available aircraft in the single-player, non-free mission roster, which is really strange considering the game lets you take skills into these missions. So why not just let us take whatever aircraft we want into any mission? I was looking forward to flying my CFA-44, man. You just can't win with this game. Also, the fact you can only have up to 3 people and not 4 for co-op is strange to me. The host of the session is Warwolf1/Shooter1, Player 2 is Warwolf3/Shooter2, and Player 3 is Warwolf4/Shooter3. Why no one can take control of Guts is odd to me. In a literal gameplay sense, I know why. For Pipeline, Guts still does his scripted run where you gotta do the emergency airstrike mode path to save him, but if the devs wanted to keep that moment intact, couldn't someone flying as Warwolf 2 have their own unique emergency airstrike mode path that they initiate, then halfway through the other players get their own emergency airstrike mode path so they can save Guts? I'm so confused. Why didn't the devs want anyone controlling Warwolf 2? Especially since the ending to Homefront is different in the co-op version, so there doesn't need to be a magical alignment of the stars type moment of Guts taking the missile hit. This game, dude, it makes no sense. Well, PvP is up next. Going into this, I was actually looking forward to giving Assault Horizon's PvP a try. I thought that if there was any mode where the close range assault mechanic could be justified, then this would be it. This would be where dogfight mode and airstrike mode work the best. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually had fun. I had fun with Ace Combat Assault Horizon. What is this feeling? Fun? With Assault Horizon? It feels so weird. The PvP side to Assault Horizon has 3 game modes: Capital Conquest, Domination, and Deathmatch. Capital Conquest tasks both sides with destroying the other's HQ. This game mode is split into 2 phases. Phase 1 tasks you with fighting over a piece of land to capture a transmission base. You wipe out all the enemies there, and if the enemy has previously taken control of it, you fire at the transmission tower itself on top of clearing out all the enemies. Then when the transmission base is yours, Phase 2 tasks you with dealing as much damage to the enemy's HQ as possible before you lose control of the base. An attacker versus defender type of game mode where both sides sides take turns doing just that. Domination is exactly as it sounds. You got 3 points on the map, you need to hold on to as many of them as possible to gain points. Ground units will spawn at captured zones as soon as they're taken by either side, meaning that taking an enemy point isn't as easy as just flying into the circle for a little bit. Deathmatch is the free-for-all type mode. Whoever reaches the target score wins. Simple as that. Deathmatch was fun, but it was pretty bare bones in the grand scheme of things. Just air-to-air combat with everyone in either fighters or multi-roles. Meanwhile, Domination and Capital Conquest allows all aircraft types to flourish. Fighters are perfect for keeping the skies clear and covering any allies aiming to do airstrike mode runs on capture points or the enemy's HQ. Multi-roles are the jack-of-all-trades aircraft, perfect for air-to-air and air-to-ground/sea combat. Attackers can often deal incredible amounts of damage to ground/naval targets with their cannons and special weapons. Attack helicopters can make themselves especially useful in Domination, being perfect for capturing points due to their ability to hover in one place, and if the circumstances allow it, bombers can even show up in a round of Capital Conquest. However, your HQ needs to be at low health in order for the bombers to be available as a last-ditch effort kind of card to play. And even though the game's multiplayer scene is dead nowadays, bots can fill in any empty spots to ensure that lobbies are still full. I'm also happy to report that the bots can actually attack each other this time around on top of attacking human players too. In Ace Combat X and Joint Assault, the bots could only attack you and not each other. Here, the bots have missiles and cannon rounds rated E for everyone. That being said, the bots do have limitations. They don't seem to be able to use special weapons, I could be wrong when saying that though, and they seem to be locked to one aircraft for each type. Specifically, the Typhoon for fighters, the Gripen for multi-roles, the Viper Zero for attackers, and the Apache for helicopters. So it's not a true-to-life replica of how Assault Horizons multiplayer was like back then, but nowadays, this is probably as good as it's gonna get. Again though, even with the rest of the lobby consisting of bots, fun can still be had. It can be especially intense, but also kind of funny whenever you wind up in a dogfight mode counter-maneuver chain, like you get behind someone, they counter-maneuver you, and then you counter-maneuver them, and then they counter-maneuver you again. Like I said, it can be equal parts intense and funny, though dogfight mode can be a little wonky online. I found that it was pretty stable against the bots, but with Fuzon, it was a bit hit or miss. There's also a killstreak kind of weapon in the form of the EW1, aka Trinity for the PAC-FA. If you reach a killstreak of 8, the next time you spawn, you'll be able to equip the Trinity missile and do some unrivaled damage. Be careful not to fly into your own Trinity blast radius though.
Allied units attacking enemy HQ. Respond.
All in all, the PvP of Assault Horizon was fun, which is still so strange for me to say. Like Fuzon said at the end of our multiplayer session together, this was a diamond in the rough. The vast majority of the game is, to put it politely, rough. Like, really rough. But the PvP is the one area where I actually smiled, where I actually laughed, where I was actually invested, where I was locked in, and most of all, where I had true fun. Ace Combat Assault Horizon is a lesson on what happens when you sacrifice what makes your franchise unique in the pursuit of chasing trends. A problem that's still here in the video game space to this day. It's natural to see someone do something, get rewarded for it, and as a result, you try to do that very same thing. In the context of video games, it's one thing to be inspired while putting your own twist on that inspiration to keep your franchise's identity intact. But it's a whole nother thing to compromise that identity so much that by the time you reach the end result, you can hardly tell that it's supposed to be an Ace Combat game or whatever other franchise you want to fill in the blank with here. People jokingly say that if this game didn't have the Ace Combat name attached to it, then it would be good. I would argue that even if this was a standalone game, separate from the standards and expectations that previous Ace Combat games had set, it would still be bad. But I think that speaks as to how much of an identity crisis Assault Horizon was for Ace Combat. Now, am I saying that experimenting with new ideas is bad? No, but said experiments need to have a limit to them. As soon as you start going from being inspired to blatantly chasing trends, you need to hit the pause button and dial it back. But Project Aces and Bandai Namco didn't dial anything back, and as a result, we have Assault Horizon, a game that tried to copy the success of Call of Duty and the general FPS boom at the time, and failed. There are little things here and there that I can appreciate from this game. The different camera angles, the destruction, the PvP, and the graphics as a whole, with this being the best looking Ace Combat game up to this point. But there are far too many bad things in this game for me to enjoy it overall. You know, now that I've talked about this game for however long this video ends up being, I feel sad. I know, probably not the emotion you were expecting. Or maybe it was the emotion you expected, I don't know. Either way, it hurts to see Assault Horizon try to be something it isn't. Keep in mind, this was a mainline entry for the series. This wasn't a spin-off kind of thing. This was sold as the next mainline Ace Combat experience. To see Ace Combat become this shell of its former self, all in the pursuit of trying to cater to a larger audience is, like I said, it's sad. It hurts to see. If you end up trying to please everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one. Where Ace Combat would go from here was anyone's guess. Did the devs lose track of what made Ace Combat so special? Would the franchise be able to recover from this major slip-up? Would Ace Combat as we know it ever come back? All of these questions wouldn't be answered for years. But when the new Ace Combat game finally did release all those years later, it would go on to be one of the most divisive titles in the series. I saw that godforsaken game in my dreams, many times. But I made it through. I was better than my fears about this game, better than my nightmares about it. But to find out, I had to face this game once and for all. I had to get through the worst to prove I was the best. That was such an awful game. Thank God I'm done with this piece of shit.